In the grand scheme of galactic stupidity, attacking a human outpost ranked somewhere between licking electrical outlets for flavor and using a black hole for data storage. Unfortunately for the Krillaxian raiding party, nobody had bothered to tell them this particular bit of interstellar wisdom. Camp Horizon sat on the edge of the Viridian expanse, a modest collection of prefabricated structures that barely qualified as a scientific outpost by United Earth standards. Technically speaking, they were here to study the unique geological formations and atmospheric conditions of Outpost 7B. Unofficially, it was Earth's way of planting a flag on yet another rock and saying dibs before anyone else could. Jack Murphy, chief engineer and resident troublemaker, was sprawled in his chair outside his quarters, boots propped up on a crate of equipment that probably should have been catalogued weeks ago. His weathered face sported 3 days of stubble, and his utility jumpsuit bore stains whose origins were best left unexplained. Next to him, coiled in what appeared to be blissful sleep, was Fang. To call Fang a pet was like calling a supernova a light show. The creature resembled something between a komodo dragon and an octopus, with iridescent scales that shifted colors with its breathing. 6 limbs ended in what could charitably be described as paws, if paws normally contained retractable claws capable of shearing through titanium. Its head was smooth and tapered, with 4 eyes arranged in a pattern that allowed for 360-degree vision, though at the moment, all 4 were contentedly closed. "You're getting lazy, buddy," Jack said, nudging Fang with his boot. The creature made a sound that might have been a purr, if purrs typically caused nearby liquids to vibrate. "Camp security is literally your only job." From across the central courtyard, Dr. Eliza Voss looked up from her datapad with a scowl that could have curdled milk. "That thing is not camp security, Murphy. It's an unauthorized xenobiological specimen that should be in containment, not lounging around our supplies." "Fang's not hurting anyone," Jack replied, reaching down to scratch behind what might generously be called the creature's ears. "Besides, he's saved our bacon more than your fancy perimeter sensors ever have." Commander Marcus Reed, head of the outpost and perpetually exasperated babysitter to 12 brilliant but socially challenged scientists, emerged from the main facility. His uniform was impeccable as always, creating a stark contrast to the general dishevelment of the camp. "Murphy, the atmospheric readings are going haywire again. Can you check if it's the equipment, or if we're actually experiencing another one of those magnetic storms?" Reed's eyes drifted to Fang and narrowed slightly. "And please keep your companion away from the new geological samples. Last week he ate a rock that Dr. Patel spent 3 days analyzing." To be fair, Jack grinned, Fang excreted it in better condition than he found it. Practically polished, Reed pinched the bridge of his nose, a gesture he'd perfected during his 2 years in command of Camp Horizon. "Just fix the sensors, Murphy." As twilight descended on Outpost 7B, bathing the prefab structures in an eerie purple glow from the planet's twin moons, none of the humans noticed the slight disturbance in the perimeter force field. None except Fang, whose third eye cracked open just slightly, pupil dilating as it tracked movement where no movement should be. 3 kilometers away, hidden among the crystalline rock formations that gave the region its scientific value, First Strike Commander Zigvar, of the Krillaxian Acquisition Fleet, adjusted his ocular enhancers. The human camp looked pathetically vulnerable. No visible weapons systems, minimal shielding, and only a dozen life signs detected. "Primary target confirmed," he chittered into his communications device. "Initiate infiltration protocol. Remember, we need at least 3 live specimens for the Ancestral Mind to examine." His second-in-command, Lieutenant Krex, mandibles twitching nervously, pointed to the thermal imaging display. "What about that creature with the odd heat signature?" "The one next to the human with the facial hair," Zigvar clicked dismissively, "clearly a decorative organism, or perhaps a food source. Humans are known to keep useless life forms for emotional attachment. Ignore it." As the Krillaxian strike team began their approach through the gathering darkness, Fang stretched languidly, all 6 limbs extending to their full length before he settled back into what appeared to be slumber. What the Krillaxians couldn't possibly know was that this wasn't just any human camp, and Fang wasn't just any pet. They were about to learn both lessons the hard way. Jack Murphy hadn't exactly planned on adopting an apex predator from another evolutionary chain. It had been more of a right place, wrong time situation that somehow worked out in his favor, a recurring theme in his life. 3 standard months ago, while surveying a ravine 20 clicks south of camp, he'd stumbled upon what looked like a large iridescent egg wedged between 2 crystal formations. Scientific protocol dictated immediate reporting and non-interference. Jack's personal protocol, honed over 15 years of frontier work, was considerably more flexible. "Well, aren't you an interesting little paperweight?" he'd muttered, scanning the egg with his multi-tool. The readings were inconclusive, which only piqued his curiosity further. He gently pried it loose and tucked it into his sample bag. 2 days later, he awoke to find his quarters transformed into ground zero of what appeared to be a gelatinous explosion. In the center of the mess sat a 6-limbed creature with 4 blinking eyes, contentedly gnawing on Jack's spare boot. "You've got to be kidding me," had been his first response. "Commander Reed is going to space me for this." But something about the creature's tilted head and curious gaze had stayed Jack's hand from hitting the security alert. Instead, he'd spent the next hour cleaning up the goop, while the newly hatched whatever it was followed him around like an imprinted duckling. When the creature displayed an impressive set of retractable teeth, while devouring Jack's breakfast ration, the name Fang had seemed appropriate. Keeping Fang a secret had lasted approximately 4 hours. "What in the 17 hells is that, Doctor?" Voss had demanded upon entering Jack's workshop to find Fang perched on a shelving unit, meticulously arranging spare parts by size. "Exotic pet from my last shore leave," Jack had lied smoothly, "completely harmless. Just looks intimidating." That particular fiction had collapsed spectacularly during the camp's first encounter with the indigenous predators of Outpost 7B, 6-legged feline analogues locally dubbed hexcats. A pack had breached the perimeter during a sensor malfunction, which Jack had absolutely not engineered to test Fang's capabilities. No sir. The ensuing chaos featured 3 terrified scientists trapped in the mess hall, Commander Reed trying to organize a defense with standard-issue stun batons, and Fang, sweet, innocent Fang, moving with such speed that he appeared to be in multiple places simultaneously. When the dust settled, 6 hexcats lay in various states of incapacitation, and Fang was calmly grooming himself in the center of the room, not a scratch on his iridescent hide. That, Reed had said in the stunned silence that followed, is not a pet. Jack had shrugged. He is now. Thus began the uneasy truce. Fang was permitted to stay uncaged on the condition that Jack kept him under control, and Dr. Voss was allowed to run non-invasive tests. The latter had yielded fascinating but inconclusive results. "His cellular structure resembles nothing in our databases," Voss had explained during one of the camp's weekly briefings. "His DNA, if you can even call it that, has triple helix components that shouldn't be biologically possible, and his brain activity," she'd paused here, uncharacteristically hesitant. "Well, let's just say it's complex enough that I'm not entirely sure he isn't smarter than everyone in this room. He organized my socket wrenches by molecular density yesterday," Jack had offered helpfully, "and I'm pretty sure he solved some of Dr. Catri's quantum equations when nobody was looking." Catri, the camp's theoretical physicist, had turned an interesting shade of purple. "That was you? I thought the cleaning bot had scrambled my notes." Not everyone appreciated Fang's presence. Dr. Patel from geology maintained a healthy distance after the rock-eating incident. Communications specialist Tomas Rodriguez swore Fang deliberately interfered with transmissions whenever Jack was due for a performance review, and everyone had noticed how the creature seemed to position itself between Jack and any potential danger, however mundane. "You do realize," Commander Reed had told Jack privately, after Fang prevented an oxygen tank explosion by absorbing the electrical surge with his own body, "that if Earth Central knew what we had here, they'd send a containment team faster than light speed." Jack had nodded grimly. "Which is why this stays between us until I figure out exactly what he is and where he came from." What Jack hadn't told anyone, not even Voss with her scientific curiosity, or Reed with his cautious pragmatism, was that sometimes, in the quiet darkness of night, when the camp slept, and Outpost 7B's twin moons cast their eerie glow, he would wake to find Fang staring out at the stars with all 4 eyes wide open, body trembling not with fear, but with what Jack could only interpret as anticipation, as if Fang was waiting for something. What Jack also hadn't mentioned was his growing suspicion that the egg hadn't been abandoned, that perhaps, just perhaps, Fang had been left there deliberately, for humans to find, for Jack to find, and that whoever or whatever had left Fang behind might someday come looking. Across the galaxy, countless species had learned the hard way that humans were remarkably adaptable, surprisingly durable, and inexplicably lucky. But the Krillaxians, with their hive-mind approach to intelligence gathering, had missed a crucial data point in their assessment of the species. Humans didn't just survive on frontier worlds, they thrived, and they did so by forming alliances with the most unexpected companions. The Krillaxian attack force had studied human military outposts, human colonies, and human spacecraft. They understood human weapons, human tactics, and human technology. What they hadn't studied were human pets, and that oversight was about to cost them dearly. As Outpost 7B's twin moons reached their zenith, casting long shadows across the crystalline landscape. The Krillaxian infiltration team took their positions around the human camp perimeter. Their carapaces, naturally evolved for camouflage, shifted to match the purplish hues of the alien terrain. To the untrained eye, or inadequately calibrated motion sensors, they were practically invisible. First Strike Commander Zekvar clicked his mandibles in satisfaction. The operation was proceeding according to projections. 12 Krillaxian warriors, each standing nearly 7 feet tall with 4 multi-jointed arms and chitinous exoskeletons that could deflect standard-issue human weaponry, had surrounded the pathetically vulnerable outpost. Their mission: capture at least 3 humans for study by the Ancestral Mind, gather all technological data, then eliminate any remaining specimens. Simple, efficient. By all calculations, a task requiring no more than 17.3 minutes of standard time. Teams Alpha and Beta, prepare for synchronized breach. Zekvar subvocalized through his neural transmitter. Team Gamma, maintain perimeter containment. Remember minimum damage to the primary specimens. Lieutenant Krex, positioned nearest to what appeared to be the human's main habitat structure, focused his compound eyes on the thermal imaging display in his visor. Most life signs indicated sleeping humans, easy targets. But one particular signature puzzled him. Commander, the anomalous creature is still active, Krex chittered. It appears to be patrolling. On his view screen, Zekvar observed the strange heat signature moving with odd precision around the camp's interior. Something about its movement pattern seemed almost deliberate. Irrelevant, Zekvar dismissed. Probably a scavenger species the humans tolerate for waste management. Focus on primary objectives. Krex wasn't convinced. The creature's thermal pattern suggests a metabolic rate far beyond. Are you questioning tactical assessment, Lieutenant? Zekvar's antennae flattened against his head in irritation. Next you'll suggest their beverage dispensers pose a threat. Inside Camp Horizon, most of the humans were indeed asleep. Dr. Voss had nodded off at her lab station, data about atmospheric anomalies scrolling unread across her monitor. Commander Reed slept the light sleep of career military, one hand never far from the emergency protocols tablet. In the communications hub, Rodriguez snored loudly, feet propped on the console that should have been actively monitoring perimeter alerts. Jack Murphy, however, was awake. Sitting in the darkness of his quarters, he methodically cleaned a vintage projectile weapon, a revolver, according to Earth Historical Archives, that technically wasn't authorized for civilian personnel on research outposts. Something's not right tonight, he murmured to Fang, who had paused at the door, all 4 eyes focused outward, body unnaturally still. You feel it too, don't you, buddy? Fang's scales rippled through a sequence of colors that Jack had come to recognize as agreement. Then the creature did something unusual. It returned to Jack's side, and gently nudged the ammunition case with one limb. That bad, huh? Jack raised an eyebrow, loading the revolver with practiced ease. All right, I trust your instincts more than those garbage sensors Reed insists are adequate for scientific purposes. He finished loading the weapon and tucked it into his belt. But let's not cause a panic if it's just another hexcat migration, okay? Fang's response was to open what had initially appeared to be decorative gill slits along his neck, revealing rows of bioluminescent tissue that pulsed with soft blue light. Well, that's new, Jack commented mildly, as if discovering yet another unexpected feature in his alien companion was just another Tuesday, which on Outpost 7B, it practically was. Outside the perimeter, the Krillaxian attack force began their synchronized breach. Their exoskeletons emitted precisely calibrated electromagnetic pulses, designed to temporarily disrupt human security systems without triggering alarms. 4 entry points, 3 warriors each, a standard infiltration pattern that had proven effective on 17 previous human outposts. Breaching in 3, 2, 1, Zekvar transmitted. The first warrior through the eastern breach point moved with practiced precision, multi-jointed limbs, allowing for silent movement, despite his towering height. His mission was simple: neutralize any security systems in this sector, then proceed to. His thoughts, and indeed his existence, ended abruptly as something bright and impossibly fast catapulted from the shadows. His neural transmitter had time to broadcast only a single high-pitched shriek, before it too went silent. In the command post, Zekvar's antennae stiffened in alarm. Report, Eastern Team, report. Silence. Northern Team, status, he demanded. Breaching perimeter now, Commander. No resistance in count. The transmission dissolved into static. Zekvar's compound eyes flicked rapidly between thermal displays. 2 warriors down. Impossible. The humans were still in their sleep cycle. Nothing was moving except the anomalous creature, which was no longer registering on thermal imaging. All teams, priority alert, unknown defensive entity active, proceed with maximum caution. In the southern sector, Lieutenant Krex froze at his commander's warning. His mandibles clicked rapidly, a Krillaxian stress response. Commander, request clarification. Are we facing automated defenses or biological countermeasures? Before Zekvar could respond, something massive dropped from above, landing directly beside Krex. In the moonlight, he found himself face to face with a creature whose previously closed gill slits now flared open, emitting an eerie blue glow that reflected off the lieutenant's carapace. For one frozen moment, Predator recognized Predator across the biological divide of entirely different evolutionary paths. Then Fang smiled. It wasn't a human smile, it wasn't even a mammalian approximation of pleasure. It was the ancient expression of something that had evolved to be at the very top of whatever food chain had shaped it, a smile that contained too many teeth arranged in too many rows, extending further than any jaw should anatomically allow. Krex managed one desperate transmission. It's not a pet, stars help us, the creature is not a pea. Inside his quarters, Jack Murphy calmly poured himself a cup of coffee from a thermos, as the first distant sounds of chaos reached his ears. Outside, something that might have been a scream cut off abruptly. This was followed by several impacts, a series of high-pitched chittering noises, and what sounded remarkably like someone, or something, being thrown against the reinforced wall of the main facility. Jack took a sip of coffee, grimaced at the temperature, and reached for his boots. Guess I'd better go see who's visiting, he sighed, as if midnight attacks were merely an inconvenience rather than a potential extinction-level event for whoever had made the unfortunate decision to breach Camp Horizon's perimeter. From across the camp came the distinctive sound of alien technology shorting out, followed by what could only be described as a squeal of terror. Jack finished lacing his boots, checked his revolver, and ambled toward the door with the unhurried confidence of someone who knew the situation was well in hand. "Save some for me, Fang," he called out casually into the darkness. "And try not to get their bodily fluids on Dr. Voss's equipment this time. You know how she gets." As if in direct response, something that sounded very much like an exoskeleton being systematically disassembled, echoed from the direction of the laboratory. The night, which had begun so quietly on Outpost 7B, was now filled with the sounds of Krillaxian warriors learning a fundamental lesson about the universe. Some pets aren't pets at all. First Strike Commander Zekvar watched in mounting horror as thermal signatures of his warriors vanished one by one across his displays. The meticulously planned infiltration had collapsed in minutes. "What is happening?" he demanded. "Where are northern and eastern teams?" "All signals lost, Commander," reported the communications officer. Lieutenant Krex's final transmission mentioned the anomalous creature. He said it's not a pet. An inhuman screech pierced the night, followed by the sound of shredding chitin. Western team engaged with the creature. The tactical display showed chaotic footage from a warrior's helmet cam, something iridescent moving too fast to track properly. For a terrifying moment, the feed captured rows of teeth unfolding from what had seemed like a normal mouth, extending impossibly far as blue light pulsed from gill-like structures. The feed went dead. "Deploy sonic disruptors," Zekvar ordered. "All remaining units, converge on the central facility." Inside Camp Horizon, Dr. Eliza Voss jolted awake to the sound of twisting metal outside her laboratory. "Perimeter breach," she fumbled for her communicator. "Commander Reed, security breach in progress." Commander Reed was already moving, sidearm in hand. "All personnel, security protocol Omega-7, shelter in place." Rounding the corner of the hydroponics bay, Reed nearly collided with Jack Murphy, who was casually leaning against the wall, sipping from a steaming mug. "Evening, Commander." Jack nodded as if they'd met for a scheduled break. Reed stared. "Murphy, what the hell is happening?" "We have visitors," Jack replied, taking another sip. "Insectoid species. 4 arms, chitinous armor, about 7 feet tall. Don't worry though, Fang's handling it." On cue, a large alien body sailed through the air behind them, crashing into a supply crate. It was missing 2 arms and part of its thorax. Reed spun, weapon raised as Fang emerged from the shadows. But this wasn't the lazy creature they knew. Its scales pulsed with bands of blue light flowing across its body. 6 limbs flexed with lethal grace as it stalked forward. Most disturbing were the previously unseen features now displayed. Gill-like structures along its neck emitted an eerie glow, and its mouth extended nearly a third down its body, revealing rows of teeth that rotated like a biological chainsaw. "Murphy," Reed said quietly, "what exactly is your pet?" Jack shrugged. Still working that out myself. Reed's communicator crackled. Commander, Dr. Voss's voice tight with fear. Another group heading for the main lab with some kind of sonic device. A high-pitched whine cut through the night, and Fang convulsed, its bioluminescence flickering erratically as it screeched in pain. Sonic disruptor, Jack muttered, face darkening. He set down his coffee with deliberate care, and pulled out his revolver and a small metal disc. Commander, check on the others. I need to help my friend. With what? That antique, Reed demanded. This is just backup. Finding Fang wasn't exactly the accident I led everyone to believe. Jack pressed the disc, which emitted a blue pulse matching Fang's bioluminescence, then strode toward the sonic disruption. Near the lab, 3 Krillaxians maintained positions around a tripod-mounted device that had incapacitated Fang. The creature lay writhing on the ground. Containment successful, reported the lead warrior. The creature appears susceptible to frequency disruption. Neutralize it permanently, then proceed with specimen collection, Zikvar ordered. I wouldn't do that if I were you, came Jack's calm voice. The warriors turned to find a single human standing there with a primitive revolver. You are now property of the Krillaxian Ancestral Mind, the leader's translator rendered. Surrender or be terminated. You know what's frustrating about you spacefaring types? You never do your homework, Jack said, stepping forward. This planet's crystalline formations generate harmonic resonances that amplify certain energy signatures. It's why Earth put a research station here. The small disk in Jack's hand began pulsing rapidly, and crystals embedded throughout the camp started glowing with the same blue light as Fang's gills. Fang isn't a pet, Jack explained as the sonic disruptor's whine warped. He's a partner, and he's really good at adapting. The disruptor cracked, its tone reversing completely. Fang rose, body pulsing with intense light that synchronized with the glowing crystals around them. Oh, and he can absorb energy signatures and reflect them back amplified, Jack added with a cold smile. Fang launched forward with impossible speed. What followed wasn't combat but systematic dismantling, 6 limbs moving in perfect coordination, teeth fully extended, tearing through the warriors with surgical precision in seconds. Fang turned to Jack, head tilted questioningly. Good job, buddy. Jack nodded, patting Fang's head. But we're not done yet. From across the camp came sounds of more Krillaxians regrouping. Jack's expression hardened as he checked his revolver. Let's introduce ourselves properly. Dr. Voss emerged from her lab, staring at the creature she'd studied but clearly never understood. Murphy, what is happening? What is Fang? Jack glanced back with a wry smile. Let's just say he's Earth's first line of defense against visitors who don't bother to knock. In the command post, Zikvar received the final fragmented transmission and made his decision. Full retreat, he ordered. Abort mission. But Commander, the Ancestral Mind requires. The Ancestral Mind does not yet know what we have encountered here. If we wish to ensure our species' survival, we must report that humans do not keep pets. They keep monsters, and worse still, the monsters like them. Krillaxian First Strike Commander Zikvar huddled behind the makeshift barricade his remaining warriors had hastily constructed from equipment salvaged from their landing craft. His pristine exoskeleton, once a point of pride in diplomatic assemblies, now bore stress fractures across its polished surface. 6 warriors remained from his original force of 12. 6 warriors between him and what he was increasingly certain was not a scientific outpost but an elaborate trap. Status of retreat preparations, he demanded, antenna quivering. Transport vessel powering up, Commander, responded his tactical officer. 4 standard minutes until evacuation is possible. 4 minutes, an eternity in combat situations. The creature appears to be moving toward our position, reported the perimeter guard, compound eyes wide with what Krillaxians rarely admitted to feeling fear, and the human with the primitive weapon accompanies it. Maintain defensive formation, Zikvar ordered, trying to project confidence he no longer felt. The sonic disruptors didn't work, but concentrated energy fire may yet. A familiar screech split the night air, but different this time, modulated, almost like, is that thing communicating? The communications officer whispered. Before anyone could respond, the ground beneath them began to vibrate. The crystalline formations surrounding their position, features they had dismissed as geological curiosities, started to emit the same pulsing blue light that emanated from the creature's gill structures. Energy readings are off the scale, reported the science officer, frantically working his scanner. The crystals appear to be resonating with. The officer never finished his sentence. The crystal nearest to him suddenly shattered, sending thousands of razor-sharp fragments through his thoracic cavity. Across the clearing, other crystals began to fracture and explode in sequence, creating a deadly storm of crystalline shrapnel that specifically targeted Krillaxian exoskeletons, while somehow flowing around their human attackers. 3 more warriors fell, their carapaces providing no defense against projectiles moving at supersonic speed. "Fall back to the transport," Zikvar commanded, abandoning any pretense of organized resistance. As the surviving Krillaxians scrambled toward their ship, a lone figure stepped into the clearing, the human with the revolver. Behind him, the 6-limbed nightmare stalked with predatory grace, its body now pulsing with light, so intense it hurt to look at directly. "Leaving so soon," the human called out casually. "But you've only just met the welcoming committee." Zikvar's translator struggled to interpret the human's tone, but the meaning was clear enough. With his remaining warriors providing covering fire, energy beams that the creature somehow dodged with contemptuous ease, the commander continued his retreat. "We sought only knowledge," Zikvar shouted back, mandibles clicking in agitation. "The ancestral mind requires information about potential threats." The human tilted his head slightly. "So you admit you came here looking for ways to attack Earth? To defend ourselves," Zikvar insisted. "Your species expands too rapidly, claims too many worlds." The human, Jack according to the intelligence briefings, paused seeming to consider this. For a brief hopeful moment, Zikvar thought he might have found a diplomatic opening, then Jack shrugged. "Fair enough. But here's a lesson for your ancestral mind next time, try knocking." With that he made a small gesture toward the creature, Fang, the Krillaxians had learned it was called. The monster's response was immediate and devastating. It launched itself toward the remaining warriors with impossible speed, 6 limbs working in perfect coordination as it tore through exoskeletons, designed to withstand vacuum exposure and radiation. Not attacking randomly, Zikvar realized with horror, but systematically disabling weapons, communications devices, and mobility functions. Disabling, not killing. As his last warrior fell, reduced to a twitching immobile heap of still-living chitin, Zikvar found himself face to face with the human and his pet. To his surprise, the creature had retracted its most terrifying features, the rotating teeth now concealed, the glowing gill structures closed, its posture almost docile as it stood beside its human companion. "Your ship should be ready for departure now," Jack said calmly, the primitive projectile weapon pointed casually at what passed for a Krillaxian heart. "I've disabled your weapons systems, but life support and navigation remain functional. You'll make it home." Zikvar's antenna twitched in confusion. "You're letting us go." With a message, Jack's expression hardened. "Earth doesn't want war with anyone. We're explorers, scientists, traders, not conquerors, but if attacked..." He glanced down at Fang, who gazed up at him with what looked disturbingly like adoration. "Well, let's just say we have friends in unexpected places." Zikvar studied the human and the creature for a long moment. His species had encountered many civilizations throughout their expansion, some peaceful, some warlike, some beyond comprehension. But humans were something new, a species that formed attachments to things that should by all evolutionary logic, see them as prey. "The ancestral mind will receive your message," he finally clicked, a gesture of mandibular submission indicating acceptance of terms. "But I must know, what is this creature? A bioweapon? A synthetic guardian?" Jack smiled slightly, reaching down to scratch behind what might generously be called Fang's ears. The creature made that strange vibrating sound that resembled purring. "Let's just say Fang is Earth's insurance policy," Jack replied. "And he has relatives on every world humans have settled. They like us, they protect us, and they're very, very good at what they do." Whether truth or calculated psychological warfare, the implication sent a shudder through Zikvar's carapace. The Krillaxian slowly backed toward his ship, never taking his compound eyes off the human-monster pair. "You were never supposed to be here," he chittered accusingly. "This sector was not marked for human expansion." Jack's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Funny thing about humans, we have a habit of turning up where we're least expected. Give your ancestral mind something to think about." As the Krillaxian ship lifted off, its engines straining under emergency departure protocols, the rising sun of Outpost 7B cast long shadows across Camp Horizon. The crystalline formations had ceased their ominous glowing, returning to their deceptively ordinary appearance. Commander Reed emerged from the central facility, flanked by Dr. Voss and several other staff members. All stared wide-eyed at the devastation surrounding them, twisted alien technology, fragments of exoskeletons, and scattered across the compound, the twitching but very much alive forms of Krillaxian warriors, Fang had systematically disabled. "Murphy," Reed said slowly, surveying the aftermath, "I believe you have some explaining to do." Jack, who had holstered his revolver and was now casually scratching Fang's head, while the creature contentedly curled its 6 limbs into a more compact posture, glanced up with an expression that managed to be both sheepish and defiant. "Would you believe I just got lucky finding him?" he asked, gesturing to Fang. Dr. Voss stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming her residual fear. The creature's bioluminescence interfaced directly with the crystalline formations. "That's theoretically impossible, unless," she paused, eyes widening, "unless it evolved specifically to utilize this planet's unique mineral composition." "Got it in one, Doc." Jack nodded. "Fang's not an exotic pet that followed me home. He's indigenous, and more importantly, he's not the only one." As if on cue, a series of low melodious calls echoed from the crystalline formations surrounding the camp. 1, then 3, then dozens of responses rang out from all directions. Fang's head lifted, all 4 eyes blinking in sequence before he emitted an answering call, a sound somewhere between a purr and a song, resonating with the very crystals beneath their feet. "You knew," Reed accused, his expression a complex mixture of anger and reluctant admiration. "You knew what this creature was when you brought it into my camp." Jack sighed, the easygoing facade slipping for the first time to reveal something more calculated beneath. "Earth's Central Intelligence suspected this planet might be of strategic importance beyond its scientific value. I was sent to verify whether the indigenous life forms would pose a threat, or an opportunity." "You're not an engineer," Voss concluded, staring at him with new understanding. "You're an operative." "I'm an engineer," Jack corrected with a hint of injured professional pride. "But yes, I also work for ECI when required. The thing is, Doc, these creatures," he gestured to Fang, "they've been protecting this planet for millennia. The crystalline formations aren't just geological curiosities, they're part of a planetary defense system, and the Fang species are its guardians. And they just accepted you." "Accepted us?" Reed asked incredulously. Jack's expression softened as he looked down at Fang, who had returned to what appeared to be a nap against his leg. "That's the thing about them, Commander. They're predators, apex predators the likes of which we've never seen before, but they're also selective. They judge intent. The Krillaxians came looking for weaknesses, looking to exploit. We came to learn." "And now?" Dr. Voss asked quietly. Jack looked toward the horizon, where they could all see dozens of iridescent forms moving through the crystalline forest, drawn by the commotion, or perhaps by Fang's call. "Now," he said with a small smile, "I think humanity just made its first truly formidable ally." Commander Reed surveyed the disabled but living Krillaxian warriors. "What do we do with them?" "Medical treatment, then diplomatic processing," Jack answered promptly. "Earth Central will want to establish formal contact with the Krillaxian Ancestral Mind. This misunderstanding could be the beginning of something productive." "Misunderstanding," Reed echoed incredulously. "They attacked us, and Fang taught them the error of their ways." Jack grinned, reaching down to scratch the creature's head again, "without killing a single one. That's important, Commander. These creatures," he nodded toward Fang, "they could have slaughtered every Krillaxian. Instead they disabled, incapacitated. They're not just powerful, they're precise, intelligent, moral." "Doctor," Voss added softly, her scientific mind already racing with implications. Jack nodded. "Exactly, and that's why Earth needs them as friends, not specimens." As the sun climbed higher over Camp Horizon, more of Fang's species emerged from the crystalline forest, approaching the human outpost, not with aggression but with careful curiosity. Their scales shimmered with iridescent patterns, communicating in a visual language humans were only beginning to understand. Fang, meanwhile, had returned to his seemingly perpetual nap, all 6 limbs tucked under him, deadly teeth concealed behind what appeared to be a contented smile. To any observer, who hadn't witnessed the night's events, he looked exactly like what the Krillaxians had initially dismissed him as, a harmless pet, dozing in the morning sun. That misconception had nearly cost them their lives. As Jack Murphy surveyed the aftermath of the battle, if one could call such a one-sided encounter a battle, he couldn't help but smile. Somewhere across the galaxy, the Krillaxian Ancestral Mind was about to receive a very important message. The humans don't have pets, they have allies. And that made all the difference in the universe. The twin moons of Outpost 7b hung low on the horizon, bathing Camp Horizon in ethereal purple light. 3 days had passed since the Krillaxian attack, and the evidence of that night's chaos was nearly erased. Twisted metal had been salvaged, alien technology catalogued and secured, and the last of the injured Krillaxians had been shipped off-world under diplomatic escort. Jack Murphy sat on his usual crate outside his quarters, boots propped up on another container that actually had been properly catalogued, thanks to Commander Reed's renewed insistence on protocol. Beside him, Fang dozed contentedly, occasionally twitching one of his 6 limbs in what Jack liked to imagine were dreams of the hunt. "You know they're never going to let us keep this quiet," Dr. Voss remarked, approaching with 2 steaming mugs. She handed one to Jack before perching on an adjacent crate, her usually pristine lab coat now bearing the stains of 3 days' worth of frantic research. "Appreciate it," Jack nodded, accepting the coffee. "And yeah, I know, Earth Central's already dispatched a diplomatic team, and a xenobiology unit should arrive within the week." Voss studied Fang with new eyes, the eyes of someone who had witnessed something that fundamentally changed her understanding of the universe. "All this time, I was cataloging his external characteristics, running non-invasive scans, treating him like an exotic pet, when in reality he's part of the most sophisticated planetary defense system we've ever encountered," Jack finished, sipping his coffee. "Don't beat yourself up, Doc. That was kind of the point." "But you knew," she challenged, though without real heat. "You knew what he was when you brought that egg back to camp." Jack was silent for a moment, watching as the first of the evening light phenomena began, crystal formations in the distance starting to glow with soft blue bioluminescence. It was a nightly occurrence they'd documented since establishing the outpost, but now they understood it wasn't just a geological curiosity, it was communication. "I suspected," he finally admitted. "Earth Central Intelligence intercepted Krillaxian communications 6 months ago. They were planning systematic exploration of frontier worlds with minimal human presence, looking for weaknesses, entry points. When I found Fang's egg, I recognized the species from classified briefings. These creatures have been observed on 3 other worlds where human outposts mysteriously avoided alien incursions." Voss's eyes widened. "You're saying they've been protecting us without our knowledge, across multiple worlds?" "That's the working theory." Jack scratched behind Fang's ear like sensory organs, eliciting that strange vibrating purr. "They seem to have an affinity for humans specifically. Every documented case involves them bonding with human outposts, while maintaining aggressive resistance to other species with expansionist tendencies." "But why us?" Voss wondered. "What makes humans special?" From across the courtyard, Commander Reed approached, his uniform immaculate despite the days of heightened activity. "Perhaps the better question, Doctor, is what makes them special." He nodded toward Fang. "Murphy, Earth Central just sent new directives. I think you'll want to see them." Jack accepted the data tablet Reed offered, skimming the contents. His expression shifted from casual interest to surprise, and finally settled into something resembling resignation. "Well, that's unexpected," he murmured. "What is it?" Voss leaned closer. Jack handed her the tablet. "Turns out our friends aren't just indigenous to this planet. According to this report, fossilized remains of Fang's species have been discovered on Earth, dating back 20 million years. That's impossible," Voss breathed, scanning the data. "They would have been apex predators. We'd have myths, legends, fossil records throughout human history. Not if they didn't want to be found," Reed said quietly. "Not if they were intelligent enough to stay hidden." The implications hung in the air between them. If these creatures had existed on Earth itself, had somehow managed to conceal their presence throughout human evolution, what did that mean for humanity's perceived dominance of their home world? "There's more," Jack added, nodding to the tablet. "Swipe right." Voss complied, and her jaw literally dropped. This can't be accurate. According to these readings, the crystalline formations here match geological samples from 17 different human colony worlds, all exhibiting the same unusual resonance patterns, all housing outposts that have mysteriously avoided alien aggression, Reed confirmed. "They didn't follow us," Jack said softly, looking down at Fang, who had opened one eye, and seemed to be watching him with unnerving intensity. "We followed them, subconsciously perhaps. Something in our collective instinct drew us to worlds where they already existed." A low melodious call echoed from the crystal forest surrounding the camp. Then another, and another, until the night was filled with a chorus of otherworldly communication. Fang lifted his head, all 4 eyes now open, and responded with his own call, more complex than they'd ever heard from him before. "They're converging," Voss whispered, checking readings on her personal scanner, "all around the perimeter, dozens of them." Jack stood slowly, a strange expression crossing his weathered features, not fear, but something akin to reverence. "I think it's time we learned the truth." At the edge of the camp, where the perimeter lights cast long shadows across the crystalline landscape, they gathered, creatures like Fang, but with subtle variations, some larger, some with different iridescent patterns flowing across their scales, all watching the humans with four-eyed gazes that held unmistakable intelligence. From among them emerged one that stood taller than the rest, its scales bearing patterns more complex and vibrant than Fang's. As it approached, the crystals around the camp began to pulse in synchronized rhythm. "Don't move," Jack cautioned as Reed instinctively reached for his sidearm. "This isn't a threat display." The creature stopped at the perimeter's edge, just outside the boundary of what humans had arbitrarily claimed as their territory. It studied them for a long moment, then slowly, deliberately, lowered its head in what could only be interpreted as a bow. And then it did something none of them expected. It spoke, not in a human language, but in precisely modulated pulses of bioluminescence that caused the crystals throughout the camp to vibrate at specific frequencies. The vibrations produced sounds that coalesced into words. "We have watched. We have waited. You have proven worthy." Jack stepped forward, hand resting lightly on Fang's head. "Worthy of what?" The creature's gill structures flared, emitting more complex patterns that the crystals translated. Partnership, protection, purpose. Reed and Voss exchanged stunned glances as Jack continued the unprecedented first contact. "You've been protecting human outposts," Jack said. "Why? We were here before. We will be here after. But between we need guardians, who see beyond their own survival." Voss couldn't contain herself. "You're saying you've selected humans as what? Caretakers?" The creature's scales rippled in what might have been amusement. "Not caretakers, not masters, not pets, symbiotes. We defend, you explore, together we preserve." "Preserve what?" Reed demanded. The answer came not in translated vibration but in a sudden collective illumination of every crystal formation for kilometers in every direction. The light coalesced above the camp, forming a holographic representation of the galaxy, but not as humans knew it. Overlaid on familiar stellar cartography were patterns, connections, flows of energy that defied human scientific understanding. The network, the balance, the way. As the light show faded, Jack looked down at Fang with new understanding. They're not just defenders of planets, they're defenders of something much bigger, and somehow, they've decided humans are meant to help them. The lead creature made another sound, which the crystals translated into a final message. "Long ago, your kind named us, called us guardians, protectors, friends, then forgot, but we remember. We waited, now you return to the stars, and we welcome you back to the ancient alliance." With that enigmatic statement, the creature retreated back into the crystal forest, followed by its companions, leaving the humans of Camp Horizon to contemplate implications too vast for immediate comprehension. "What do we do now?" Voss asked quietly. Jack looked down at Fang, who gazed back with what could only be described as patient expectation. "Now," Jack smiled slightly, "now we relearn what our ancestors apparently once knew, that humans were never alone in the universe, not even on Earth itself. And that sometimes, the most powerful allies come in the most unexpected packages." Commander Reed squared his shoulders. Ever the pragmatist, Earth Central will want a full report. "Tell them." Jack paused, considering his words carefully. "Tell them humanity just rediscovered its oldest friends, and that the galaxy is both more dangerous and safer than we ever imagined." As they stood there in the purple twilight of Outpost 7B, surrounded by gently glowing crystals and the distant calls of creatures humans were only beginning to understand, Jack couldn't help but smile at the cosmic irony. The Krillaxians had attacked a human camp, expecting easy prey, only to discover humanity's secret advantage, an advantage humans themselves hadn't fully comprehended until now. They had dismissed Fang as a pet, a decorative companion species of no strategic value. It was the last mistake they would make in their assessment of humanity's place in the galactic order, because as species throughout the cosmos would soon learn, humans didn't conquer worlds, they befriended their guardians. 3 parsecs away, aboard the Krillaxian diplomatic vessel that had retrieved the survivors of the failed raid, First Strike Commander Zukvar stood before the holographic projection of the Ancestral Mind, the collective consciousness of his species' eldest and wisest members. "The humans must be contained," insisted Elder Vrex, his ancient carapace bearing the ceremonial marks of 300 cycles. "If they have allied with the ancient guardians, we cannot contain them," Zukvar interrupted, a shocking breach of protocol that sent murmurs rippling through the assembled elders. "We must negotiate, establish diplomatic relations, learn from them, learn." From mammals, Elder Chris's mandibles clicked in derision. From a species Zukvar countered, that somehow earned the loyalty of creatures old enough to have witnessed the rise and fall of the progenitor civilizations. From a species that these guardians have deemed worthy of protection. A heavy silence fell over the chamber, as the implications settled into the collective understanding of the ancestral mind. Finally, the eldest of them all, matriarch Tiscala, her carapace so ancient it had begun to crystallize, leaned forward. Perhaps, she chittered softly, we have been asking the wrong question. Not how do we contain humanity, but why did the ancient guardians choose them? Zukvar's antenna dipped in respectful acknowledgement. Precisely, honored matriarch, and I would suggest we have much to learn from the answer. As the Krillaxian vessel altered course toward the newly established diplomatic channels with Earth Central, rumors began spreading across the galactic communication networks. Rumors of strange, six-limbed creatures with iridescent scales appearing on human frontier worlds, of attacked outposts where invaders simply disappeared, of humans who walked with ancient guardians at their side. Soon, species throughout known space would reassess their understanding of humanity's rapid expansion into the cosmos. Because humans weren't just persistent explorers with remarkable adaptability, they were protégés of something far older and more powerful than any new. And the galaxy would never be the same.